My name is Tim Phelps. I'm the Executive Director for the Transportation Management Association of Chester County, also known as TMACC. We are here tonight to talk about the Devault Trail, the proposed Devault Trail. And I think, John, you'll be going on in the history about this. We ask that you put all your questions and comments in the Q&A. John Ewald and I will be curating those questions as we go through and give them to the appropriate person to answer. Let's open up with the first poll here before I hand this over to John Meisel. Let's launch that poll here. If you would take a second here, I'll leave this open for about 30 seconds. The question is, in which municipality do you reside? And then once John has finished with his presentation, I will give you a second poll. So we have 55% of our attendees tonight are from Charlestown Township. And I will leave John to discuss that. Stop sharing the results. I will go and close this. John Meisel, it's all yours.
Thank you, Tim. Good evening, everyone. I'm John Meisel. I'm the Manager of Transportation Operations and Planning at TMACC, and I'm also the project manager on this project, which we're calling the Devault Trail Activation or Action Plan. We're very excited to be with you here this evening and excited that there are so many of you joining us. We are going to give a short presentation and then we're going to open up to a Q&A. I'm going to introduce the project team members, our steering committee, talk a little bit about the project purpose, approach, timeline, and products. And then Bob Thomas is going to give a context of the Devault Trail and a little bit of history of this project. And then Patrick Starr is going to talk a little bit about some of his findings to date on looking at management groups, entities, on trails in our region. And then we're going to open it up to questions and answers and then talk a little bit about next steps, how you can stay in touch with the public participation process, and then a second public meeting that we're planning for the fall. Before I go any further, I just want to let you know that we are being guided by a steering committee that we assembled for this project. The steering committee is made up of 9 entities, which are municipalities bordering the trail and stakeholder groups in the region. And just to let you know specifically who we have from Charlestown Township, we have Linda Csete, who's the township manager, and Michael Churchill from the Planning Commission. From East Whiteland Township, we have Zach Barner, who's the Director of Planning and Development, and Steve Brown, who's the Director of Codes and Life Safety. From Schuylkill Township, we have EJ Mentry, who's the township manager, and we also have Susan Garrett from the Board of Supervisors. And then from Chester County Planning Commission, we have Brian Steich, who's the Environment and Infrastructure Director, and Rachel Griffith, who's the Senior Trails and Open Space Planner. Then from the other side, from Montgomery County, we have Bill Hartman, who's a Trails and Open Space Planner. And then Bob Thomas, who's a partner with Campbell, Thomas and Company, and who you'll be hearing from shortly. Patrick Starr, who's the Executive Vice President of the Pennsylvania Environmental Council, and Patrick Monahan, who's the regional organizer with the Bicycle Coalition of Greater Philadelphia. And then also on the steering committee is myself, Tim, who you heard from shortly ago, and Jonathan Ewald, who's TMACC's Manager of Corporate and Community Outreach. So the purpose of this project is to build upon the feasibility study that was done back in 2015. It was done by Bob Thomas and his colleagues. And at that time, that feasibility study looked at various alignments, possible alignments for the Devault Trail, various possible trailheads, uses of the trail, and came out with a preferred alignment as a result. The next step is really to answer the question, if and when the trail is built, what or who is the appropriate entity or organization to acquire the property, build the trail, manage and monitor the trail, and maintain it. And that's really the purpose of this study. Charlestown Township and TMACC, we applied for a grant with the Delaware Valley Regional Planning Commission and were awarded, it's a Community Development Initiative grant. We were awarded last year, smack in the middle of COVID, a grant to study this. It's an $80,000 grant. 64,000 of that comes directly from the DVRPC, the Delaware Valley Regional Planning Commission, and the additional $16,000 comes from matching funds and in-kind labor and time that's being put forth by some of our partners. So the grant itself was awarded to Charlestown, and TMACC is going to be doing the bulk of the planning work. But along with us on our actual project planning team, we have Chester County Planning Commission, we have the Pennsylvania Environmental Council, we have Westchester University, and they're going to be aiding us with some of the planning work that we're going to be doing. To give you an idea of the timeline for this, as I said, we were awarded the grant last summer. We began our existing conditions work shortly thereafter. And then in the beginning of this year of 2021, we began meeting with the steering committee that I introduced earlier. So far, we've had a meeting every month. Beginning in February, we have these monthly meetings, planning meetings, while our existing conditions work goes on. This is obviously our first chance to come to the public and talk about the scope of work and what we aim to accomplish with this project. Our work will continue after this, and our hope is that we come back to you all in the fall of this year, hoping November, with a second meeting. And at that second meeting, we will be able to present recommendations and our findings. And again, the purpose of the project is really to answer the question, who is the appropriate entity to acquire, build, and manage the trail. I think it's important to say that we are not at the ready stage to start building. As most of you know, but in case you don't, the property is owned by Norfolk Southern Railroad, and there has been outreach and connection made with them in a preliminary way, but they want to deal with one entity when talking about possibly selling or having someone acquire the property. So that would be the next step after this. And of course, any trail or any project has to go through a detailed master planning process, really get to the nuts and bolts of how the project would be constructed. So that would come next. So this project is really sort of an interim necessary step in the middle between the feasibility analysis that was done in 2015 and the actual planning for construction of the trail and acquisition of the property. I hope that's clear about our goals and our scope for this project. We realize that people have a lot of questions, particularly when it comes to policing of the trail, picking up of trash, maintaining privacy, and we will address which groups would deal with those issues once we come up with the proper entity or group of organizations or townships or whomever turns out to be the correct entity to own and run the trail. You're going to hear more about some of the early research that's been done on that. But first, I want to turn it over to Bob Thomas, who's going to give us some background on this project and on the trail.
So excuse me, Bob, before you start, I know that Linda does have some opening comments from Charlestown Township. Linda, would you like to share those comments with us, please?
Oh, yes, thank you. I did want to begin by welcoming everybody to the first of these 2 open houses. I'm very happy to see the turnout from Charlestown especially, and especially on an evening like this that is probably the best day of the year so far. I can only echo what John already said, that this is by nature, it's a very time-consuming process because of all the moving parts and all the different players in this project. And I would like to say that while we like to say we teamed with TMACC to assist us with the grant application, that's another way of saying that they really did all the work, and we are very appreciative of their assistance with the planning work on this project. I again would just like to say that it strikes me how nice a day it is, and we can think in the future that on an evening like this, instead of sitting on a Zoom meeting, we could be actually out there enjoying a trail like this at some time. So that's all I really had to say, and thank you.
Thank you so much, Linda. And yes, I also saw in the chat, and I apologize, Ed, Phoenixville Regional Planning Committee Planner Ed Thurkoff was also sat in on the meetings. I know it's really important. Again, you know, this is a Charlestown initiative right at this time, but it does encompass many municipalities around it. And Charlestown wanted to be inclusive of all those communities that touch their borders in this conversation. Before I throw it over to Bob Thomas, let me throw up the my next poll here. Here we go. I'm going to launch this, leave this up so Bob can get himself ready. The question I ask is, why did you attend tonight's public meeting? I don't know anything about the Devault Trail concept. I've been following the proposed trail since 2015. I'm eagerly awaiting for the trail. I have concerns about the proposed trail, or you have another comment. And we'll leave this open for about 45 seconds here. And I will share it. So 49% or 46 people that are on the call today that responded to this poll question is, I am eagerly awaiting for the trail. So there are people that are still trying to find out more about the trail. There are some folks that have been following this along, and there are a couple of people that do have some concerns about the trail. So please put those comments and the questions in the chat, and John and I will continue to monitor that. I'm going to stop sharing the results here and throw it over to you, Bob. Bob, it's all yours.
Okay, thank you. I've been asked to give some quick background on the trail. So we'll go back about 10,000 years and zoom up to 2021. This is a wonderful map of the historic Indian paths of Pennsylvania. And of course, we're out here in along the Schuylkill River and into the Chester Valley. Let's take a bigger look. And you'll see very quickly that even in American Indian times, there was no trail that went from the Schuylkill River, no major trail to the Chester Valley. Things paralleled the river, and that was a big problem that was faced by the railroad when they got started. So this is the old Pennsylvania Railroad line that is the Devault branch, and it goes down and gets to the Great Valley, the Chester Valley this way. This was the Reading line that came up here to Cedar Hollow. And people asked me when we did the study, why why didn't they just go straight up from Phoenixville? Why did they go all the way around? Well, the answer is it's quite a climb. If you ride your bicycle all the time, as I do, you know that it's pretty tough. So this railroad was a way of defeating that huge climb. You could see all the contours and winding around and gradually getting up into the Great Valley. Here's the Phoenixville station, and just out of curiosity, you could see that at one time there was about 5 trains a day from Phoenixville down to Devault and to Fraser. Getting trails in Chester County, this area and the whole region, in fact, this is a 1932 study of nature's bounty in terms of where things could go. The dark areas are, that's the Wissahickon, that's Valley Forge, what was then State Park, French Creek out here. But there was a whole plan for parks, parkways, linear corridors, protecting all this. So here's Phoenixville, there's the French Creek and the French Creek Trail, other trails that were all planned. The salmon color is what had already been developed at that time. You can see Northeast Philadelphia was still farmland, as were so many other areas which today have been all built over. It's just unfortunate that not all these trails were put into place. It would have been much easier to do than trying to do that, you know, after things have already been developed. But the rail lines do, some of the old rail lines do offer good possibilities. So what we're looking at, this is a map of the circuit. This is our roughly 800-mile 10-county network that was started with the help of the William Penn Foundation to connect up a lot of individual projects. The green lines are things that are completed. Here's Phoenixville, here's the Chester Valley Trail, dash line when this map was made with under development. And this is the Devault Trail, which is now part of the circuit. What we looked at in the study was alternative alignments between Phoenixville and Devault. This green line is the rail line. We also looked at a alternative to the west using existing roads, and one also that came up roughly to the east, and evaluated them. We also looked at other connecting trails like the Pickering Trail, the Horseshoe Trail, and obviously links to the Schuylkill River Trail and the Chester Valley Trail. After a vigorous process of public meetings, of surveys, et cetera, of the 3 alternatives, the Devault branch trail using the rail bed was the one that was selected. Just a quick look and we'll be done and get on to other things. Here's Devault. This is a connection to the Warner Spur and down to the Chester Valley Trail coming up here, and then you pick up the old railroad bed. This is an older photo. This grade crossing, I believe, has been paved over, but this is the turnpike and this is the railroad going underneath. As you go down, you know, you go through Aldham. There's some homes like this one here. I think we have a resident here this evening. So this has been cleared and maintained by someone. Beyond here, the railroad bed is heavily overgrown. There's some great structures. This is Union Hill Road. Just, you know, wonderful architecture and engineering that Pennsylvania Railroad did. These things are really historic, and this is still here. Then you get on a section of the trail going down to the bridge over Route 29. Just gives you an idea. The way that it's cut into the landscape, sometimes it's up on a shelf, sometimes it's in a cut. And then, of course, it goes over this wonderful curved bridge, which is on the Historical American Historical American Engineering Record. Here you see the creek and Route 29 in the hills. And then as you go across the landscape, getting into Schuylkill Township, you can see one of the crossings and the railroad bed heading down to the Schuylkill River. Coming into Phoenixville, this is French Creek. Here's downtown Phoenixville. The blue lines are the SEPTA bus lines. This is Norfolk Southern Railroad, no longer has passenger service. We looked at linking to the Schuylkill River Trail. The Schuylkill River Trail is there and complete and continues all the way down to Philadelphia. We looked at a connection via Paradise Street from the Devault Trail to the Schuylkill River Trail. And that's what this looks like right here. So when we did this, the Schuylkill River Trail had just been opened when we worked on the study. And this is the old Devault branch going over to the former site of Phoenixville Station. And that brings you then right into Phoenixville here at the Foundry. So that's just a quick taste of what the trail is, what are the alternatives that we looked at in the 2016 study, what was selected, and what did the connections look like. Thank you very much.
Great, thank you, Bob. As I touched on before, the heart of this study obviously is really looking at possible ownership and management and what the appropriate structure for that would be. Patrick Starr, who's a part of our project team and a member of the steering committee, has done already some preliminary research on groups, entities, organizations, the types of groups that manage trails in our region. And he's going to talk for a few minutes about what he's found so far.
Yeah, hello, everybody. Good evening. I just thought I'd mention that the Pennsylvania Environmental Council works on trail projects all across the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, which is, I think, why we were invited to undertake this investigation of options of 4 trail entities. Let me just see here. I'm trying to get to the right. Oh, I'm not getting to the right version. There we go. And I already jumped ahead. I also have the pleasure in my day job of serving as the vice chair for Pennsylvania of the Circuit Trails Coalition that Bob Thomas referenced. And again, it's wonderful to see interest in creating this connection between the Schuylkill Trail and the Chester Valley Trail. I think it'll be a beloved connection once that exists. I think that it passes through beautiful countryside and naturally some important environmental areas. But I think that that connection, which has been so long not existing, as Bob pointed out, will be a great one for our trail network. So I've been asked to investigate some of the most central questions to this study. That said, our work is a small part of the conversation, but it is a part of it does fuel that conversation. Most of these questions that have already been pointed out as significant, we were asked specifically to look at collaborative intermunicipal structures. And that really gets to a core aspect of the approach to this project. Whenever a user is on the trail, typically one would hope for a seamless experience. One would hope for clarity about who is actually responsible for maintaining the trail. Naturally, preceding all of this is who's going to buy it, who's going to own it. You have liability issues, who's liable for it. And naturally, we've already discussed safety is a key issue throughout any trail network. If there's an accident or an incident, people want to know who's going to come to in response to their concerns. I summarize it all very simply as who you're going to call. And many of you will know what that reference is. There's not a lot of complexity in terms of the options, although there's plenty of complexity in the way these options are carried out. Now, you could have things that aren't under consideration. You could have, for instance, the county purchase it. You could have some wealthy individual step up and buy it fee simple from Norfolk Southern and allow maybe the trail to be built. But I was asked to look at collaborative structures that would create a legal mechanism for a shared approach. So we looked at across Pennsylvania, and also the context, I think, which is important, is that you need to look at the legal structure within the state in which we exist. So our state does enable county-created authorities that could be appointed, created by the county commissioners, and could have municipal representatives and others appointed depending upon the charter. But that would create an entity that would be able to undertake all the things that we've talked about here: buying the trail, being liable for the trail, maintaining it, keeping it clean, building it. Another approach that would not necessarily involve the commissioners at the county level creating it would be what are called intermunicipal agreements. These are commonplace in Pennsylvania. Municipalities share all sorts of services in Pennsylvania, from policing to traffic control, sanitation, recycling services. Intermunicipal agreements are extremely flexible, provide for lots of options, and can define very clearly how management would be done, who would do it, can also prescribe within the agreement either a method for funds to be contributed by the participating municipalities and entities, or even potentially create a contribution structure. And I have a couple of examples here. The Lackawanna Heritage Trail actually is a county-created authority that was created by Lackawanna commissioners. There's an intermunicipal agreement that governs how it is actually maintained. And then an example here of a nonprofit association around our state capital. There is a multi-municipal trail called the Capital Area Greenbelt that's actually maintained by a nonprofit association with participation by the participating municipalities. So I'm not going to go any deeper at this time. My object was merely to be really clear that all these things are being considered. They are some of the things that are on the table for discussion. And out of this process, I believe, will come a recommendation that will be adopted and agreed to by the group. Thank you, John. I hope that answered or provided what I was asked for.
Yes, yes, it did. Thank you, Patrick. And I'd just like to add, obviously, a lot of work lies ahead of us. There's a lot of different possibilities, a lot of different organizational nuances and assemblages that we can put together, that can be put together to acquire and manage the trail. That work lies ahead of us to really figure out what would be the appropriate one for the Devault Trail project. When we come back to you, the public, in the fall for a second public meeting, we will be in the position to make a recommendation of what the appropriate organization or type of organization would be for that acquisition and management. And I think that will, I hope, answer a lot more questions as we flesh out our work. That being said, I want, before we open it up, I'd like to say that there are opportunities for you all to maintain your connection to the project and your input. At the very end, you're going to be given a slide that has our contact information, our email, our contact. You can reach out directly to us to stay in touch. You can also stay in touch. There's a section on the www.tmacc.org website, which is TMACC's website, devoted to the Devault Trail, updates to the timeline, and we're putting some of our work on there as we complete it. Also, I think a lot of you keep in touch through your municipalities' social media and web pages as well. And then again, we hope to have the same outreach for the second public meeting prior to the second public meeting in the fall, with postcards sent out and social media announcements and blasts on Facebook and Instagram and social media. But again, you will have the opportunity throughout to keep your finger on the pulse and stay in touch and reach out to us directly.
So excuse me, John, before we move on here, I want to post our next poll question here. for everybody here. We're going to launch the poll here. We'll leave it open for about 45 seconds. I plan to use the trail for commuter cycling, walking, running, jogging, or other. And as people go through this, John, I do have a series of questions that are in the chat box. I've been curating through and answered some of them, but I know that there are a couple here that I know that we could open up here to for some general discussion with Bob and with Patrick, you and myself on that. Great, thank you everybody for your feedback here. Open for a couple more seconds here. Yes, Ronald, I should have included physical biking in that too, the recreational side of the bicycling. And I apologize for that. I will take responsibility for that. Great, here we go. I'm going to end the poll here. We do have 58% of the folks that were going to be using the trail when cycling was for recreational purposes was not added, was walking, followed by a tie between commuter cycling and other. So that's great on that. And we'll now close that poll. And John, when we close out, I do have one more poll at the end. Let's see here, we'll close that. And then we'll go here. I do have the series of questions. I'm going to scroll to the top. So one of the early questions that came in was, who ultimately is accountable for safety and maintenance of the trail on a day-to-day basis? John, I'll give that to you.
Well, I think that remains to be seen, depending on whether it's an intermunicipal group that will ultimately maintain the trail and police it. But it's probably, while the trail will probably be owned by one group, the maintenance and policing of it might fall on the individual municipalities.
So that is one segment of the study that we're actually working through. So when we come, if the trail was to come to fruition, this is one of those topics, trash, policing are two key issues that most people have concerns about trails. So we'll be addressing that as a part of the study here. Dismiss that one. What's the status of the evaluation Norfolk Southern book value historically used by railroads to value real estate versus the appraised value currently used in the real estate development conservation profession? So I will answer that when we have had general conversations with Norfolk Southern. But as John pointed out early on in our conversation, we would like to look at the whole segment and come up with a decision on what segment that we want to have a value on it. And then it is going to be a conversation about the book value that Norfolk Southern does seek, and then also the real estate development conservation side on that side of the book value. And that's when all negotiations begin for any property acquisition. So that has not been decided as of yet, but it is a part of the conversation that we are having within the group itself. The question is, how many years out are we away from seeing the trail open, assuming that everything goes somewhat smoothly? That is a very challenging question because, as you can see in the outline in the conversation, there are several of the moving parts. One is to make that decision about the entity that is going to own and operate the trail. And once that agreement gets into place, the second is, what is that negotiation happens with Norfolk Southern? And then the land acquisition that comes into that. There's also the planning stage that has to take place so that we have to do the engineering drawings and then do the cost estimates for that. And then the last of that is actually to raise the funds to make sure that we have commitment for the funding of this project as we move forward. And then the construction says. So this is not a project that's going to be finished by the year end. But the timing, Patrick, a trail this size, if everything would go right,
I'm
magic
gonna
bullet.
say, yeah, whoa, 5 to 6 years.
Yeah.
That was
Yeah.
my answer, 6. Just based on having to acquire the property, that even once I'm working on a section of the 9/11 trail where CSX donated the land because it was the 9/11 trail, and it's taken 3 years to accept the donation and go through the environmental reviews and everything. So that could be somewhat time consuming. The
Yeah,
other
I mean,
is that what's completed was a feasibility study in 2015. All the design and so forth has to go through all kinds of environmental review. It will be a vigorous public process. Many of the concerns that I see in the Q&A are things that will be answered when the trail actually goes to design. There will be all kinds of public meetings and walkthroughs and questions and things that have to be answered about the details. So yeah, 6 years if everything went smoothly is probably, now it may also be that because you're talking about 7-8 miles of trail, and then also linking to the branch, Cedar Hollow branch, down to the Chester Valley Trail. Yes, the intent is to reach the Chester Valley Trail using the Cedar Hollow Trail in Tredyffrin Township. It's likely the trail would be built in phases. It's not very unusual that you'd have this much trail built in one swell swoop, so to speak.
Yeah, this is Brian Stites from Chester County Planning. I'd say a more conservative estimate, it might be a little bit more than 6 years,
Yeah.
considering the funding rounds that have to go in between those phases and the time that it takes to do the master planning and the design and permitting. I would say 10 years might be more realistic.
yeah, well, Brian, we don't disagree with you. The question was framed as a best case scenario.
Yeah, that requires a lot of.
I mean, and I wanted to reiterate what Bob said, because we are seeing some good points regarding what Bob is really referring to in terms of engineering and design, which hasn't been done for this project. So when folks are asking questions about environmental conditions, those things have not been evaluated. And that is part of what is done when you actually decide to do engineering and design. Meanwhile, you don't even have site control. So
Right.
it's premature to do all of those things.
Yeah, in terms of, the question was, what if everything went perfectly well? And the answer is, we designed did the study for the Perkiomen Trail, designed 2/3 of it, and coordinated the construction of all of it. That was done in 4 years, 18 miles of trail. But what made that happen was one of the 3 county commissioners in Montgomery wanted to ride his horse from Valley Forge to Green Lane Park, so to speak. And there was an incredible number of staff assigned, weekly meetings, project checkoffs. We were out there measuring in the snow, I remember. But it got done in 4 years. But that would probably be the absolute minimum. And that was also, of course, after they got the right-of-way. That took a while. Getting the right-of-way took 10 years. After that, it was 4 years to build it, to design and build it.
So I know there are a couple of questions and comments in here about the public safety aspect as we move forward. And I think that goes also in the lines of what Patrick has discussed. Once the committee is formed, the potential owning entity, these will be some of the items that group will then have to grapple with as they go through the engineering planning. So we can't answer that directly tonight, but with your comments being in here, we can put them in for further review in the future by whatever group that is being recommended to tackle that. Patrick, you've seen this at many different trails throughout the Delaware Valley about trail safety.
Yes, it's frequently raised as a concern. The truth is, when you're thinking about incidents like people running into each other or having an accident, those occur. There's almost an inverse relationship between trail activity and criminal activity. Often corridors that are developed as trails are those attractive nuisance places that can become or can be historic hotspots for police activity. And once you create a trail, you're doing a couple of different things. You're bringing people who are eyes and ears and a presence onto the trail, which discourages inappropriate behavior. And you're also actually building what amounts to, because this is a proposed multi-purpose ADA accessible trail, you're actually creating police access. So it's interesting. It's maybe slightly counterintuitive to some of the public perceptions, but at this point, there's a lot of experience, Tim, that underscores that trail development actually opens areas to appropriate policing and appropriate behaviors.
Thank you, Patrick. We do have a question here. As somebody that does live along the Werner Spur, does the proposed trail on the Werner Spur have strategic value environmentally and politically in the overall trail network, including the Devault Trail? As Bob pointed out on the historical side, the answer to all of that is yes. And as we continue to work and move forward, we do want to have trail connectivity in a corridor. It is much like having sidewalk connectivity in a corridor. But as we look at this, there are also ways to review things to include additional trails or other trail connections that are around it. So one is not dependent on the other, but they do have kind of a mutual, I'll call marriage that makes it harmonious. So, but again, it is about making that trail connectivity that happens with that.
I would add that being a designated circuit trail is very important for funding and management. It really brings attention, money, and strength to a trail. One reason the Devault Trail was put on the circuit was because it, along with the trail through Tredyffrin down to Cedar Hollow, connects to the Chester Valley Trail. So it's a very important major link. If the Devault Trail was just a dead end trail, it would not have the same value, either for users, and as a result, it wouldn't have the same attractiveness for getting funded for efforts like what we're all involved in this evening.
So there's a couple of questions that are residing in here about other trail connectivities. I do think there can be in the future when that engineering process is done, that's when the trail heads would be discussed, and that is a completely different meeting for conversation. Also a review of how it connects to other locations. I know one of the questions here was some other sites and parks within East Whiteland Township. Those would all be considered in the next phase of the trail development process. So where is a question in here, and I know that it always comes up with the price tag. Do you have a ballpark estimate of what the cost of acquiring the right of way and developing the trail would be? That really depends on a lot of different aspects. And so it is not an area that I think we should speculate in or have conversations wrapped around until we kind of know what the alignment is. And frankly, as we talk about, what I'll call paving material, some of that cost is driven by the barrel of oil. So, until we're closer to that time frame of actually having site control and having some better estimate plans, that would be the time that we would talk about cost. This is really a project that talks about the management of the trail and how we would put this together as a land development project and a land development maintenance project that's out there.
But Tim, I'd just like to add to that there are a lot of different trail funding sources out there. And one of the next steps would be looking at which of those funds could be tapped into at the state level, at the county level, national level. And that would have to be examined as well. But there are a lot of possible sources for funding that would aid in this process.
One of the questions that's here, and I know that there are a lot of great questions that deal with, trail access points and pricing and so forth. And we've answered many of those. There's a couple that I will be answering independently here. One of the questions was, why was the rail line suspended and abandoned? So as far as by definition, the rail line has not been abandoned, but the reason why it's not an active line is that they currently do not have any customers to use that line. And so Norfolk Southern is not using it currently to serve.
Actually, my understanding is that this portion of the line from Phoenixville to Devault, the last train was in 2005 and the line was formally abandoned from what we understood, and it's in our study, in 2007.
Okay.
Now, there was also, I saw in the chat a question about the rest of the rail line that goes from Montclair to the Oaks Marketplace. When we talked with Norfolk Southern, they said that they saw no interest whatsoever in ever running anything up from Phoenixville to Devault. There simply aren't the customers that would provide for that. However, on the Montgomery County side, where it's down at a flatter area along the river, they said there are some industrial development sites there that might be of interest to them. So they would probably not be interested in pulling up the tracks there. The other thing I would say is we did both the feasibility study and then the preliminary and final design for the Schuylkill River Trail between Perkiomen Creek all the way to Montclair and to the bridge. And at the time, we did look at that rail line, the old Pennsylvania Railroad line from Perkiomen Junction up to Montclair. But we also looked at the streets, Walnut, and we looked at doing the restoration of the towpath of the Montclair Port Providence reach of the Schuylkill navigation. And of course, as you know, it was the towpath that won out. That was restored. The canal was restored. The trail was put there. So there'd be very little reason for Montgomery County to want to build a second Schuylkill River Trail on their side. So it's unlikely that there'd be any interest in doing that.
Bob, we'll have to check on this, but I think I agree with Tim. I don't believe it has been officially abandoned. I think it is technically inactive.
Okay.
Because if it was abandoned, that does have some impacts relative to the corridor and how it was initially
certainly
assembled. So that's something
what we do believe is that the railroad was acquired from local property owners, the right of way, and a fee simple basis.
Yeah, I think you're right, and that is something I think that we would also have to look at when we come up to the acquisition, is just confirming that through title search.
No, you'd have to do your due diligence on both items.
Absolutely.
I saw there was a question, would the Rails to Trails Act be used? And what that would do, that would allow, if the line has not been officially abandoned, it would allow it to be converted to trail use and avoid the issues of abandonment and reversionary rights. But a check of title, how the land was acquired, which could be done, would determine whether that would happen. This is all very technical stuff, just to say that whatever work is being done would look at what's the status of ownership, and what would Norfolk Southern be doing in conveying the property, to whatever entity is going to take it over.
So I have a couple of questions that are in here that relate to engineering designs phase. When will they be initiated? What are the prerequisite conditions? Has things been have been inspected? I understand through Norfolk Southern they have inspected their bridges. I don't know when the last time it was, but many of those items would be when in the next phase. So again, this working group would be dissolved. Somebody would then commission the study on what it would take to activate that line as a trail itself. So you have your your feasibility study. We've done the management study. Then we'll look at some of those things that need to be before, it's exactly like buying a house. You need to have that homeowner's inspection before you have, site control. So you'll
Right.
go through that. So those are all tasks that will come in the future. And again, there's a couple of folks that have asked about price tags and where the funding would come from. Again, we don't know what that overall price tag is. Patrick or Bob may have an idea of price tags on other trails that have taken place in the Commonwealth. One can draw conclusions from that. But again, when we know what that final design is, then we would have a better estimate of those costs. The way that is then paid for is a combination of things. It just depends on that cost and availability. So whether it's grant dollars, whether whatever that's going to be to acquire that land. So most of these projects are through foundations and through federal or state grant programs that relate to trails and open space. So we'll get that will come as we go through this process. We just don't know who would be managing that process, and that's the focus of this particular study here. Let me see as I go through here. So yeah, I think I've got most of the questions that we've covered there in the Q&A. I know that we have a couple of things that were put over in the chat side. Thank you everybody for your patience. Yeah, so Patrick, I think you bring up the potential benefits for property value. There are a couple of studies that are out there. Patrick, can you put that if you know the URL, could you put that in the chat? And if you don't have it right now, if you could send that to me, and then we'll post that out on our website so that people can go after that.
Tim, Brian posted one for Chester County, but
Yeah,
I'm
we
not
had
sure. That's only to all panelists, Brian.
Yeah,
I think
I'll
we
put it.
need-
I'll put it in the. Yeah, I just put it in the panelist one. I will copy that and put it.
Just select the audience option
I
there.
got it. Gotcha.
But while I'm speaking, I mean, Brian, or pardon me, Tim, there's tremendous amount of research that's been done that shows huge positive impacts of having a well-managed and attractive trail like this next to properties, and sometimes very close. And we can provide some documentation for that at a later time.
And as part of that study that I just posted in the chat, there was a case study relative to multi-use trails in Chester County. So it doesn't talk just about, relationship to open space, but also, recreational trails.
So Bob, I believe you were part of the Radnor Valley Trail.
Not Radnor Valley, just the Radnor Township Trail.
Radnor Township
We
Trail.
were the principal consultant and then the design architect for the trail for PennDOT. They owned it free and clear. We did several feasibility studies, some for the township, then several for PennDOT. Then we designed the trail and oversaw its construction. And we're now working on the design of the next section of trail going east from Radnor Chester Road to the Blue Route, all as part of the Valley Forge to Heinz Refuge Trail.
I do have the fourth poll here that I'd like to post up. I'm going to launch this poll just to get kind of feedback from people. What other trails in the region or on the circuit do you use? We have the Chester Valley Trail, the Schuylkill River Trail, Radnor Trail, Struble Trail, Open Conservancy Trails, and others. So we do have a majority of people that are on the call still here with 29 votes that voted for the Chester Valley Trail. We do have several people that are using the Schuylkill River Trail and other folks that are using trails that are around us. There are several questions in here that refer to property value, environmental concerns, safeties of families. The property value side, again, that is something that would take place in the next round of the grants and the next round of the studies that would look at the design and acquisition. That's where the property value question would come into play for the just compensation for homeowners as it relates to Norfolk Southern. That is a relationship that Norfolk Southern would have to have a conversation about. Property values, we will be posting a couple of studies that we do have that Bob and Patrick can provide us with. We'll put them up on the project page. You'll be able to see that towards the end in the last slide. The environmental concerns, again, those would be addressed when we go into the next side, as well as the safety of families. That is an evaluation, and that is much more extensive than what this project was. This project is, if somebody were to take ownership of this trail to begin to build out a trail, to begin to develop more of a foundation for this trail, then that would be the time that we would activate the new working group. The last piece is we do have folks that are eager to continue to see this project move forward. Again, we will be having a second public meeting later on in the year. I would encourage everybody to continue to sign up for that. I would encourage people to check out the project website and so that you can keep up to date on this. And we will work with Charlestown Township to make sure that that information is made available to everybody in a timely fashion. I think
Tim, there's a slide that has our contact. I know it has my contact information in case folks come up with questions, think of questions that there
we go.
Yeah. So in case you come up with a question that you didn't think of tonight, or you're talking about it with others, or at any time in the process, there's the contact information for myself and for Linda at Charlestown Township. You can email us your question and we'll respond. And again, as Tim said, you can keep in touch, keep your fingers on the pulse of the project through the Devault Trail page on the TMACC website, which is www.tmacc.org. And also, I think through your, at least through the Charlestown Township website and social media and some of the others, posting updates and information is a good way through your municipal website to keep in touch with what's going on. We are very appreciative of everyone's input tonight and attendance. We're pleased that so many people were able to make it tonight and to be a part of this, and hope that you continue to stay involved as this project moves on. Do any other panelists or committee members have anything they'd like to add? Thanks again, everybody, for your time. And we're here. If you need us, you can get in touch with us. Thanks so much.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, everyone. We will make sure that all the questions and comments are documented and posted so that the full committee can review that and review everybody's opportunities and concerns. So thank you, everyone.
Thank you and good night.
All
right.
Good night.
Good night.